So we're going to talk in this presentation about my experience directly with the tests. And I'm also going to touch on some of the content in our specialist exam study materials so that you come away from this event with a well-rounded understanding of what these exams look like and what it takes to pass the test. I took the data governance and data quality specialist exams and passed with above an 80 on each of these two. Before that, I was a data scientist. I worked as a federal contractor building data science prototypes, and I also did some project management for digital products, managing statistics, and some database related work. And I've been teaching the CDMP exam for 5 years now. This is our first fun link. I just wanted to share this with you for you to peruse after our conversation today. This article covers some foundational information, mostly around book recommendations and also practitioner tips for taking the specialist exams. So it's definitely worth diving into, and particularly the sections where people talk about their exam debrief, their exam experience. So definitely recommend that you take a look at this article to supplement what we're going to go through in this session. One mistake that people make when they prepare for the specialist exams, and I'm speaking from personal experience when I say this, is neglecting the DMBOK. So the DMBOK is still your number one resource for getting ready for the specialist exams. Don't neglect this. Also, don't use a different book as your one book. The DMBOK is still where the majority of the questions come from, and it's going to be your best resource for studying and for taking the open book test. We're going to chat about the different CDMP tiers. Just a reminder, you need to take the CDMP fundamentals exam and 2 specialist exams to earn the practitioner or the master badge. For the practitioner badge, you must pass all 3 exams, so the fundamentals exam and the 2 specialist exams, with a minimum score of 70 on each. For the master level certification, you need to pass all 3 exams with a minimum score of 80%, and you have to submit your resume for a credential review. Unfortunately, this does take a very long time. We've had practitioners say that it takes anywhere from 3 months and beyond. DAMA is a volunteer organization. They do have, unfortunately, significant delay with their master credentialing. We are not affiliated with DAMA. I can only report on how that process seems to go for people. Unfortunately, there's nothing that we can really do to make it go faster. Just send our prayers and good wishes is the main thing. I also wanted to point out that for the master credential, you also need to have a minimum of 10 years of data or IT experience. So this counts your studies. If you happen to study something data related while you were in college, let's say, whether you were maybe a software engineer or you worked at the IT help desk, those years could count towards your years of experience. For most of us, it would be in the professional setting, like working in either a job that's data related or software engineering, IT, really like kind of technology fields. That's what they're looking for. There are 7 options for the CDMP specialist exam. Today, we're going to focus on 2 of the 7. These are the 2 most popular by far: data governance and data quality. I'm happy to report I've taken 3 specialist exams, actually, and I've had teammates who've taken several of the other ones. Collectively, the only one that we have not taken among our team is data integration. I haven't done it yet. I can't tell you what that one's like, but I have a good read on how difficult some of the other tests are. And I am pleased to tell you that data governance and data quality are among the easiest, or the fairest is what I could also say about this test. So that's awesome. It is really a fair representation of your skills and knowledge in these subject areas. So happy to talk more about the different exams, but we're going to mainly focus on data governance and data quality today. Just to touch briefly on the format, this should be very familiar to those of you who have taken the fundamentals exam. Just like the fundamentals, it's an open book test on which you can only use one book. So that means either the physical DMBOK, the digital DMBOK, or your notes, or another book entirely, but I don't recommend that. You're encouraged to take notes in the book. The test is 100 questions long. Just like with the fundamentals exam, you should expect to see all choose the single best answer out of 5. And if you are a native English language speaker, you'll have 90 minutes to take the test. So you need to average about 54 seconds per question. To keep in mind, some questions you'll be able to answer way faster than that. The ones that are more definition or concept oriented, And then some questions may take you longer because you're reading a long paragraph scenario. And then sometimes the answer choices are longer. Either they're more descriptive or they are themselves the scenarios. Just keep that in mind. This specialist exams are much harder than fundamentals, and they are very reading intensive. So if you are a slow reader, I am sorry, because it is an unfair aspect of the test taking and certification world, at least with this one. It definitely advantages people who are quick readers. The good news is for those of you who learned a language other than English as your first language, so if you are what's called an ESL, English as a second language person, then you should absolutely purchase the ESL version of the exam, and it gives you an extra 20 minutes on the test. And also you can access the native Google Chrome translator plugin. So that way it'll just be an aid for you since they don't have a translated version of the exam. Test preparation strategies. The biggest recommendation we have for preparing for the specialist exams is to make sure that you're focused on reviewing texts beyond the DMBOK that are written by DAMA affiliated authors. And it's pretty easy to understand who those authors might be when you look at the work cited for the knowledge area of the specialist exam that you're studying for. We're going to go through examples for data governance and data quality today. And there's also examples in that the first article that we linked, the Essential Specialist Exam Guide, for books that we recommend where we think they might draw questions from. Second thing I already touched on, 54 seconds. If you don't know the answer, guess, write down the number of the question that you guessed on, and then if you have time at the end, come back to it. The other really big difference between the fundamentals exam and the specialist exams is I felt way more pressed for time when I took the specialist exams. The questions were just much wordier, more challenging, etc. With the fundamentals exam, I felt 90 minutes was so much time. I could have done it in half the time. The specialist exam, I actually felt 90 minutes. I was really glad to have that full time. And for all of the exams, I recommend working until the last minute. It would be really disappointing to submit your test early and then end up with a threshold score like a 79 and feel like maybe you could have performed better if you had just taken some more time and checked your answers again. So make sure you're really using that full 90 minutes. As you're preparing, one thing I like to recommend to people is they look at questions that they are consistently missing, whether on practice exams from DAMA. Unfortunately, there isn't a practice exam when you buy the specialist exams. So you'll have to look back at the fundamentals exam questions. I recommend doing that anyway. Data Strategy Pros also has question sets. We provide specialist level challenging questions for each of the 7 domains. And doing practice questions is the #1 way to improve your skills because not only do you challenge yourself, but you also learn what areas you need to go back and study in more detail. And the act of really challenging yourself, studying in a way that is difficult for you, that cements the knowledge in your brain. So don't just reread your notes, make flashcards. Cover something over with your hand as you're reading and try to recall what was in that paragraph. These are all the ways to really lock the information into your brain. Get a full night's sleep the night of the exam. Don't take it if you feel tired. Make sure that you are fully rested and not distracted by other things because there's a lot of reading on the test. So if you start thinking about something else, you will waste time. And again, I am speaking to a personal experience with this. That was something that I found to be a little difficult. When I was taking the test, I would zone out and realize a few seconds had passed before where I wasn't really thinking about questions or doing anything productive. So it is better if you are rested and focused going into the test. All right. So all of the information that we're going to talk about in the next section is from our data governance and data quality specialist guides. They are really helpful. We revised them within the last year. They are at a very high level of detail. So I'm really proud of this product. My team and I have put a lot of hours into making them as good as they can be so that you guys can ideally pass the specialist exams. Before I go on to this section, let me take a second to answer questions. What are the second and third most popular specialist exams after data governance and data quality? The answer is data modeling and data warehousing. And those are the other 2 guides that we have available on our site right now. Modeling is in the middle, and then warehousing and master data are pretty close. And then data integration, I do not recommend taking the metadata exam. I took it and I got a 75. That's on a master level pass. But I also felt the exam itself was just infuriating because it wasn't about metadata management. It was about the creation of metadata standards. I don't really know what translation process happened to create that exam, but I didn't really feel like it was representative of the challenges that someone would face in a metadata management job function. So take that as you will. Exam questions. We offer 50 questions. We do have plans to produce additional questions for data governance, data quality. Those are the most popular. If you guys are interested in that, thank you for telling me, because I could prioritize that in our work queue and let you know when we create those products. So yeah, thank you. Your feedback is heard, and that is very helpful. I'm glad that the questions that you have are helpful to you. The associate exam questions for the fundamentals exam are much easier. So keep that in mind as you are getting ready for these tests. Next is the technical environment for taking the CDMP fundamentals or specialist exams. You should use a computer. I tried to take the test on an iPad once and it won't let you. So you can't do that. You need to use a desktop or laptop computer. You need to run the Chrome browser, and you need to have the Honorlock plugin installed on the device where you're taking the test. Honorlock will walk you through all the steps to set it up. It'll monitor you while you're taking the exam, and all the exams are AI proctored. So what that means is if there is a disturbance that's flagged, a human will then go and review it and determine whether it was just a random fluky thing, like someone accidentally came in a room where you're taking the test and then they left. That's not cheating. It's pretty cut and dry, like what is and isn't cheating. We don't really hear very often about people being mad about Honorlock flagging something that wasn't cheating. But that being said, do your best to make sure that you're in an environment where you won't be disturbed and where there's really no question about that you're taking the test according to the Honor Code standards. If you have an ebook copy of the DMBOK that you're planning to use, you must have that on a second device, not a portable monitor or an external display. It needs to be a proper machine that's not connected to the internet. So whether that's a tablet, an iPad, any of those options would be fine. They don't run the Honorlock on that device, only your main device where you're taking the test. So all our exams are offered online, except for rare instances where they are in person. And you can look at DAMA.org to see if there's any in-person exams happening near you. You can petition your local DAMA chapter to hold an exam. They used to do pay if you pass. I'm not sure if they're still offering that, because I know it's a little arduous for them, for DAMA, but that was an option for DAMA groups. And then also Dataversity conferences. Unfortunately, the next one is until a year from this December. They have a conference, hopefully in Washington, D.C., which is one of my favorite places to visit. But those are your in-person exam offerings. But otherwise, prepare to take the exam on your computer. So the cheat sheet of the DMBOK or the notes, we have the fundamentals notes. Those have been really helpful to a lot of people. That's one of our most beloved, oldest best-selling products. So definitely check that out if you are needing a Cliff Notes version of the DMBOK. Pay if you pass. Please go to the DAMA conferences. If you go to a Dataversity conference, I will probably be there. I love meeting you guys, and I usually do conference talks about our different blog posts. So Sabi asks, does DAMA offer practice questions for the specialist exams? And no, they do not. There are no official specialist exam question sets, practice exams, the way you get when you do the fundamentals exam. It's kind of tough. It's one of those things that makes these exams a little harder. And that's why we wrote the specialist guides, is because we kind of, through the process of taking these tests multiple times, boiled down actually what topics are featured on the exams. So what concepts are you likely to see? What do you need to study beyond just what's in the chapter? Because that's not enough. These exams definitely go beyond what's in the book. And unfortunately, there's no practice exam from DAMA like there is for the fundamentals exam. Thank you for that question. That is a good one. Adam asks about open book. So you are encouraged to take notes in your book. That still counts as the one book policy. If you take notes outside of your book, like in a Google Doc or a Microsoft Word document, or in longhand with a pencil and paper, pen and paper, those would be counted as their own document. So you could use that, but not the DMBOK. You have to put the notes in your book for them to count as still within the one book. Hopefully that answers your question, Adam. And we are going to now talk about the books as we go through the next sections. So this is a good segue to talking now about the test. Again, you can only do digital notes only if those notes are in your book. data governance specialist exams. So this is part 1 of 2 of the specialist exams that we are covering today. If you're free in a week, we're going to do 2 more exams, data modeling and master data, with my colleague Devin. But for today, we're going to do the ones that I have taken. There's me. This is my experience with the test. I took data governance last November. I got an 88, so I did think it was fairly straightforward to do well on this test. It was interesting. There were a lot of questions on data ethics and also on chapter 15, which is the data management maturity assessment chapter. I was not expecting that. One of my colleagues did tell me that she saw a lot of data ethics questions, but I saw even more questions on data management maturity assessment. So I would take a look at both of those chapters along with chapter 3 as you're preparing to take the exam. The specialist exams can be very intersectional. The data governance exam is the most intersectional in that it really focuses on how data governance relates to other data management practices within the organization. So that includes data architecture, data quality, metadata management, and master and reference data management, and also data ethics. It's very important. The next topic, which you'll definitely see a lot of questions on, is about data governance roles and responsibilities. You should absolutely know the operating frameworks that it mentions. So the federated, distributed, centralized, and replicated operating models, and then also the different jobs and committees essentially within a data governance function. Data stewards and data governance committees. John Ladley, who wrote the book Data Governance, that's the book that we recommend. He also wrote the lion's share of chapter 3. So his book is a more intensive deep dive into the operating frameworks and the jobs and responsibilities. That's a really good reference for this topic in particular. DMMAs, those come up a lot. It's less about a specific DMMA than it is about DMMAs in general. The questions that they will ask you are more so about the implementation and outcomes. They're very generic questions, so keep that in mind. The next part is about documentation. So how would you document the responsibilities, the policies, the procedures at various stages of implementing and maintaining data governance? And then the last component is going to be scenario-based questions. I would say 20% of these questions are based on your knowledge and experience as a data practitioner. What would you do in this situation? Like, what would you recommend? What would be your next step? Those ones are tricky because they take a lot of time. It might be a simple question, and then the answer choices are all kind of extensive with a lot of reading. Roughly 20%, this is just kind of my guesstimate based on what I can remember about the test from last year, was feeling like, okay, a lot of the questions are knowledge-based. Some of the questions are more like they're meant to test your experience. So keep that in mind. Okay, so we don't have a ton of reading recommendations for data governance. A lot of the content is straight from the DMBOK. If you have additional time, I would read data architecture, master and reference data. But again, you really do have to come at it with your data governance thinking cap on, because it's going to be more questions about the intersection, like how data governance plays a role in data architecture, master data, or data quality, etc. This exam would be a good one to take kind of right after you've taken the fundamentals exam, actually. John Ladley has a lot of stuff about the data governance organizational bodies. And the other one, which is also a great resource for the fundamentals exam, Navigating the Labyrinth by Laura Sebastian Coleman. I haven't read it, but people who have read it have told me that she has a beautiful writing style. It's much nicer to read than the DMBOK. It is like the Cliff Notes version of the DMBOK. So it's somewhere between the fundamentals notes and the DMBOK in terms of like complexity and length. A lot of people have said that they really enjoyed, like legitimately enjoyed the way that she explains the concepts for a business executive audience. We had one British lady who said that she liked to take this book around. She put it in her purse so that she could review data management on the hoof. We don't use that expression in the US, but I thought that was just beautiful. So yes, if you also want to learn data management on the hoof, then it is Navigating the Labyrinth is your best option for that. We're going to move on to data quality. I took this one actually before data governance. It's really fun. I wished that I knew or remembered more about statistics. It is, I think, really important for kind of the layperson to understand statistics. There's a couple of little gotcha questions on this test I wasn't expecting. So we'll talk more about how to prepare for those. But in general, I thought mostly it was questions from chapter 13 of the DMBOK. All right, topics covered. I loved this exam. I thought it was very straightforward. It was mostly data quality. So data quality frameworks like the Shewhart-Deming cycle, which is the plan, do, check, act cycle. Also the Strong-Wang framework, which is kind of data consumers data quality framework. So I would understand both of what they represent, like when they would be used, that kind of thing. Next one is statistical concepts. They could give you a list of numbers and ask you to provide the mean, median, or mode. So make sure that you understand those descriptive statistic terminologies. There were also questions about other aspects of statistics as they relate to data quality, so control charts and statistical process controls, etc. And then I'm also going to go through some places where you can learn. I think it's a good life skill. I also wanted to mention the software development lifecycle and the role that data quality plays in the lifecycle. I saw a couple questions on that. Data quality assessment techniques, for example, data profiling, data parsing, etc. Methods for sustaining data quality, such as reporting metrics, etc. And of course, the good old scenario-based questions. I think you'll see those on just about every specialist exam. They like to give you a situation and ask you questions about it, or you might get a question and then the answers are the different scenarios that might best apply to the question being asked. Definitely, that's the thing that makes these tests the most different from the fundamentals, because you won't hardly see questions like that at all on fundamentals. Cool. Yeah. Thank you, Natasha, for sharing your experience with PDSA. That's really very cool. In terms of mentorship, I would say take that to our LinkedIn group. That'd be the best place, I would say, to go and look for ways to kind of get hands-on with these concepts. All right. So recommended reading, Measuring Data Quality for Ongoing Improvement. We love Laura Sebastian Coleman. Yay. Next one is Executing Data Quality Projects, 10 Steps to Quality Data and Trusted Information by Danette McGilvray, who is a very nice person. I have met her. If you come to the Dataversity conferences, you too may meet her. Next is An Introduction to Statistical Learning. This is a textbook. It's very famous. I don't think you need to be that well-versed in statistics to pass this test, but like I said, good life skill. I love StatQuest YouTuber. He sings and is just lovely, so please check him out. And also, this is a fun and free online course that I found around statistics. Please review them if you want to learn more about these aspects of the data quality exam. If you guys aren't aware, the DMBOK is being rewritten right now. This probably isn't going to impact the fundamentals exam for a while, and it's probably not going to impact the specialist exams for even longer. It's definitely good to be aware of so that you can contribute. But yes, DMBOK V3 is not expected until 2027. It's going to take a minute for them to write exam items for the CDMP based on the new book. They just had a town hall. They're running a survey right now, so do check out the survey. Yeah, so for V2, there's not like an expiry. They would never say something like that because they're going to say, oh, it's still useful, it's still a valuable resource. But like I said, they're targeting Q2 of 2027 to publish the DMBOK V3. In the town hall that they had earlier this week, it was interesting. They were talking about like how there's kind of this existential debate. What is data management? You know, is data management also AI governance? Is it data science? Like all of these kinds of things could or could not be considered part of the data management domain. And so they're trying to figure out actually what they're going to put into V3. I know they also talked about having an online supplement, which ideally they would update that more frequently. One of the issues with the DMBOK, if you read the chapter on big data, there's some open source technologies from Apache and other techniques that are mentioned that are kind of no longer in play. It's been a while. The book was written in 2027. So ideally, they'll have the online update more frequent. Next question is about whether the fundamental certification will expire. I don't think so. It's hard to know how they'll handle the changeover of the CDMP. Like I said, I don't expect this to happen until probably late 2027 for them to have updated CDMPs. I don't think that means everyone will need to recertify. For the people who take the test for the first time, they'll be taking it on the new material. But for people who already have the certification, like you'll just do your regular stay a member of DAMA and then your certification remains valid. We really appreciated you guys coming. Thank you again for being so interactive and having so many questions. This was really fun. All right, bye.